In half an hour, a new day and time for our weekly survey of the latest scientific advances in tomorrow's world. And that's after today's news from the South East in London Plus.
Kent says no to the Channel Link plans, but will BR take any notice? Creditors pay the price for the Jean-Michel Jarre concert. And how Alan Wells is toppling up the tennis youngsters. Good evening. Kent's Chief Planning Officer has rejected all 4 of the options put forward by British Rail for routing a high-speed rail link between London and the Channel Tunnel. The announcement's been welcomed by campaigners who've seen several parts of Kent blighted by the threat of development. BR, however, are not obliged to comply with the decision. The final say rests with Parliament. Kent's planning officers say, where possible, trains to and from the Channel Tunnel should travel along existing lines. Any new track should be built with as little environmental impact as possible. Stephen Gardner with this report.
Kent County Council's planning officers today said yes to a new rail link to serve the Channel Tunnel, but a firm no on environmental grounds to the present route proposals being considered by British Rail. Their decision to accept the inevitability of a new rail link was based largely on this report they commissioned from a firm of independent consultants. They recommend British Rail should use existing track as far as possible and suggest the planned 180 mph speed limit be reduced to a more modest 125 miles per hour. As for Kent County Council's planning officers, they want British Rail to return to the drawing board and scrap all of its existing route proposals. They recommend that the revised route should invest in noise abatement through a series of tunnels and embankments, avoid built-up areas, and introduce a system of compensation for those whose property and land is affected.
We've said that the 4 routes should be rejected by Kent County Council. It's for members, of course, to decide whether to do that. Any alternative that is eventually brought forward and which might find favour with Kent County Council, in my judgment, will not bear a very close relationship to what's currently on the table from British Rail.
So there's no way that it could be fashioned and engineered in such a way that any of the existing routes, in your mind, could be accepted?
Well, you see, none of the routes have been engineered thus far to take account of the environment, nor in some cases of communities that lie in the path of the alternatives. And until that job is done properly, Kent County Council is not going to be able to support a British Rail proposal.
Although Kent County Council's elected members are still to give the recommendations a formal stamp of approval, the chairman of the Development, Planning and Transportation Committee is determined to persuade British Rail to become more environmentally conscious.
The money to do this sort of work has to be found, otherwise this project will not go ahead.
But of course, as you know, a bill could be presented to Parliament which could ride roughshod over a lot of the people in Kent.
I don't think so at all. If we were to petition that bill, then I believe that it would have to be substantially modified or it would fall.
They make environmental recommendations. Do you think British Rail will act on them?
British Rail will have to. I mean, the fact of the matter is that British Rail is about to embark on a very difficult exercise, that is to say, to get a private bill through the Houses of Parliament. Determined opposition to a private bill, particularly if one of the principal opponents is a major partner in the exercise, will wreck the bill. And they know that, and they're going to have to take what was said today very seriously.
With Kent County Council's recommendations yet to be approved or formally discussed by any of its members, already British Rail has objected to some of its central conclusions. Whilst they welcome the acceptance that some form of new rail link is needed, they insist that any suggestion that it should follow the present rail links would be both unfeasible and also disruptive to existing services.
Stephen Gardner with that report from Kent. Well, in our Westminster studio is the Conservative MP for Maidstone, Anne Widdicombe. Miss Widdicombe, what is your reaction, very simply, to Kent's planning officers rejecting all these proposals from BR?
Well, I have a mixed reaction. I'm very pleased with what they've said on the environment, but I think that the Minister had already made it abundantly clear that they were going to have to provide a proper environmental package, whichever route they chose. And I mean, I don't think that that is new ground. Where I strongly disagree with the report is in rejecting all 4 of the existing routes. Because if Kent County Council will not make up its mind on one of those routes, and BR decides to go ahead and choose one, then in the first place we're never going to be able to say that wasn't our decision, and the voice of Kent is actually going to be diminished. Secondly, and rather more importantly, if we go back to the drawing board now, we've already got, all of us who represent parts of Kent, constituents suffering heartache and hardship through planning blight along the 3 remaining routes of the original 4 proposals. If we now come back with routes 5, 6, 7 and 8 or whatever, we are going to prolong the blight for months to come instead of getting a decision in March, which is what we wanted, and we are going to multiply the blight by introducing more routes.
Can I just come in here, Ms Widdicombe, please?
Do.
Because you're saying there that we should go ahead with one of the existing plans simply to end the misery for the people being blighted. But what about the people who have to live with that perhaps imperfect route for years and years and years to come?
It doesn't have to be an imperfect route. I think what we are being asked to do at the moment is to select one of 3 remaining possible corridors. And then there's an immense amount of finessing to be done of the actual route. There is no need to imagine that the route has to run yard for yard through back gardens and whatever, exactly as it's laid down at the moment. What I'm saying is you choose a corridor, you eliminate blight from the rejected corridors, and then you concentrate all your efforts on getting an acceptable route along the chosen corridor, which may mean reducing the speed in order to accommodate bends to miss villages, which may mean a very full environmental protection package, which may be immensely costly, but let's get the corridor sorted out and get that decided rather than have uncertainty from years rather than months.
And would your constituents be willing to accept it if this corridor was to go straight through their back gardens?
Quite obviously, if it turned out that KCC or BR chose Route 3, I would fight very hard indeed. But what I don't want them to do is to choose nothing.
And what about you appearing to be somewhat in contradiction with Andrew Rowe, your colleague? Isn't this really leaving it wide open for BR to say, well, I'm afraid the people who are supposed to be representing the voice of Kent can't agree, we're going to have to get on and make a decision ourselves?
That's exactly what I'm afraid of, that if Kent doesn't make a decision, BR will make it for us, and our voice in the decision will be diminished. That's exactly what I'm afraid of.
Ms Widdicombe, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Deborah.
Over 100 creditors owed more than £3 million by the bankrupt organisers of October's Jean-Michel Jarre concert have been confronting the promoters in London. They were warned by the official liquidator that there could be long delays before they get any money. Many of the smaller companies now fear that they'll go bust themselves. Helena Kerkuch was at the creditors' meeting.
Despite the torrential rain, 150,000 people bought tickets for Jean-Michel Jarre's Docklands concerts, though now even that figure is apparently in dispute. From the beginning, the performances were fraught with organisational difficulties. The 2 concerts were unexpectedly postponed in September after Newham Council refused to licence them on safety grounds. Today, at a creditors' meeting in London, the promoters, RGE Events, went into voluntary liquidation with debts of over £3 million.
I've been in the rock and roll business as a musician and on the security side for 15 odd years now, and I've never been stung. This is the first time.
You're owed £71,000 plus now. What does that mean to your company?
Bankruptcy.
We were keen to see the project succeed. It was a good attempt. I mean, it was an ambitious project, but it should have been stopped long before it happened.
Do you think what happened at the concert means we'll never see anything like it staged again in London?
I should think so, yes.
Is there any question of the Department of Trade being brought in to investigate financial irregularities?
In every case, if the liquidator is not, he has to make a report on the conduct of every director to the Department of Trade, and then they consider that report, favourable or otherwise, and then they make their own moves from there on.
Do you believe these creditors have any hope of getting their money back?
There are a lot of contentious issues, and some of which are subject to litigation. I really can't comment. One will do one's best, but it won't be easy.
What do you believe went wrong during the organisation of this concert?
It seemed to be a lack of control, generally. It was a bright idea that never seemed to have really taken off, and the monies were expended willy-nilly, and people seem to have lost rather control of the situation.
I don't deny any responsibility whatsoever. That's why I was here today, to talk to the people who worked on the concert, many of which became friends of mine. I'm very sorry for an awful lot of things that have happened because they worked very hard to get the show on the road. But the legal facts and the financial facts are what they are, and as I say, they will be investigated by the liquidator and with my full cooperation.
Events didn't work out the way that Mr. Gunner and his team planned. He was, in effect, railroaded into the back seat by others who took over. There were problems with the council, there were problems with the weather, there were so many things, and I don't think it's fair at all to say that it was just incompetence.
It could be 2 years before any of these creditors get any money. By then, some fear they'll be in liquidation themselves.
Other news in the South East in brief. The full public inquiry into the Clapham rail disaster is expected to open on February the 20th. At a preliminary meeting in London, a minute's silence was observed for the victims of the crash.
34 people died and more than 100 were injured when 3 trains collided near Waterloo Station a month ago. 12 people involved in the accident are still being treated in hospital. This morning, the inquiry team met representatives of British Rail, the NUR and passenger groups at Westminster's City Hall. Inquiry Chairman Anthony Hidden QC told the meeting, "There is no contest here, there are no adversaries. We are all here to sort out the truth of what happened."
Police have issued pictures of an armed man they say held up staff and robbed 2 building societies in Essex. The man was caught by video cameras during robberies at the Bristol and West in Chelmsford and the National and Provincial in Colchester. The police say he should give himself up because in a very short time they'll know his identity. 2 drivers who ploughed into a bus stop in East London, killing a 12-year-old girl, have been convicted of causing death by reckless driving. The court heard Kelly Holland from Mitcham died after 2 drivers lost control of their cars while locked in motorised combat. The judge said 30-year-old Roy Coplin was responsible for aggressive driving motivated by masculine pride. He was jailed for 2 years and disqualified from driving for 6 years. The other driver, Adrian Kendall, was jailed for 16 months and disqualified for 4 years. The Sadler's Wells Royal Ballet is expected to confirm on Thursday that it's moving to Birmingham. At the moment, the company is based at the Sadler's Wells Theatre in North London. But the stage is cramped and facilities are not as attractive as those at the new headquarters at the Birmingham Hippodrome. Boxer Terry Marsh, who stopped fighting after being diagnosed as epileptic less than 2 years ago, has decided to return to the ring. The British Boxing Board of Control will meet tomorrow to consider whether to allow Marsh to make a comeback. The board's medical panel is already considering evidence from Marsh that he's fit enough to fight. And Camden Council in North London has agreed to pay compensation to 3 residents who complained of the nuisance caused by travellers living near their homes. The council has been accused of maladministration by the local government ombudsman. He says they have a duty to protect the health and security of permanent residents. And that's it. Richard.
One of the last remaining bastions of retail price maintenance, price fixing in other words, is being challenged by a major chain of bookshops based in London. At the moment, a legal agreement between booksellers and book publishers prevents discounting on almost all titles. Now the company which runs Dillon's and other stores says it's planning price cuts and will go to court if necessary. This from John Dass.
The British are bigger bibliophiles than ever before. Last year we bought some 400 million books. But unlike other products, wherever we buy our bestsellers, we always pay the same. Now, however, one of Britain's largest book-selling chains is intent on breaking the netbook agreement, which fixes book prices.
The netbook agreement keeps prices of books in this country at too high a level. We want to reduce those prices. At the time of the Booker Prize, for example, we would have put the 6 shortlisted books together in a package, offered them at 20% off, sold more of those books, got more people into our shops, and sold far more books to them from the wide range of titles that we carry in our bookshops.
Traditional arguments for the netbook agreement say that discount price wars could destroy the small local bookshops and also make it less worthwhile for the book trade to publish more specialised titles which aren't going to hit the bestseller list.
There'd be fewer bookshops would be less well stocked, they'd concentrate more on faster moving titles, and the price of books overall, far from being lower, would actually be higher, because you'd have to create the room within the system for the discounts actually to be given. So we'd lose those benefits. Now, clearly, if there were no net book agreement, the book trade would still continue, and it would still be a good, healthy book trade like we've got. But we think it would be a less good book trade. We think it would serve the public less well, and we think it would be a great loss if we lost the benefits that the net book agreement does provide.
We're opening bookshops which offer the widest range of choice. What we need to do is get more people in those shops and to expose them to the wide range of stock we're carrying. We'll then sell far more books of minority interest than is presently the case.
How confident are you about breaking the net book agreement?
Well, I'm totally confident that during the course of this year, we will be able to offer books to the public at lower prices.
The British book industry is worth over £1.5 billion a year, and it's still growing. But there could be enormous changes ahead if Dillons doesn't play by the book.
John Dass reporting. The Health Minister, David Miller, is being asked to withdraw a controversial £6 million government grant for a new machine to treat cancer patients at St Thomas's Hospital in London. Some consultants say the machine, called a cyclotron, can be dangerous, and they suggest the money would be better spent on existing cancer treatments. Part of the cost of the machine is being paid for by a charitable trust run to promote the cyclotron, with the government making up the rest. Paul Anstis has this report.
The new cancer unit at St Thomas's Hospital will cost £10 million. 60% of funding and running costs will be met by the government, after successful lobbying by Mrs Thatcher's eye surgeon and the Cyclotron Trust. A similar neutron machine is already in operation at Clatterbridge Hospital in Liverpool. Some cancer specialists say the equipment is unproven and potentially dangerous.
Certainly the effects in normal tissues that we see with neutrons are worrying, and one has to very carefully balance with any new treatment benefit versus harm, and that has not been done with neutrons.
Over the last 3 years, government funding for cancer research has fallen. In 1986, the Medical Research Council gave £12.6 million. By 1987, that figure had been reduced to £11.4 million. The figures for 1988 are expected to show a further drop in funding. Doctors feel the £6 million for the cyclotron machine should be spent on traditional methods.
We are woefully short of conventional treatment machines. We have the breast screening program. Patients with early cancers of the breast are discovered, their tumours are removed, and then they are to receive radiotherapy. But in many parts of the country, those patients then have to wait many weeks, which is not good for them and not good for the management of their tumour. So I would like to see that money spent on the purchase of more conventional machines.
Doctors at St Thomas's Hospital in London, where the high-energy cyclotron will be based, believe the machine represents a breakthrough in the treatment of cancer. They're already planning to install a second neutron machine.
I'm delighted to be the recipient of our high-energy cyclotron because I see it as of benefit to a select group of patients and an opportunity to further particle research in this country. There were some severe side effects with the early low-energy cyclotrons, but with the high-energy cyclotrons, you do not get these severe side effects. The cyclotron, high-energy cyclotron at Clatterbridge is being used in a perfectly safe manner. It's not dangerous.
If you had £6 million, would you choose to spend it on this piece of equipment if you had free rein?
I've never been offered £6 million, but I have been offered a fully funded, very expensive cyclotron, of which the government is going to contribute part of the money. The rest of the money, of course, will come from a charitable fundraising effort.
You couldn't use it better in other areas?
That would be a question that I'd need to give more thought to.
Paul Anstis, the reporter there. And now for sport with Michael.
Well, road running got its own rating system for the first time today, thanks to a £4,000 grant from the 3As, so everyone from the expert to you and me can know how good or bad they are. In retrospect, Anne Ford from Hounslow is rated second best road running woman in Britain. The Ranelagh Club's Hugh Jones is top man in the South East, but only number 9 in the whole of Britain. The idea is that as everyone else is ratings mad, why not road running, which claims 2.5 million participants. Tennis, of course, has ratings, not that any English names feature worldwide, but things could change. Believe it or not, these are boys from our national tennis school, based at Bisham Abbey, taking part in a new programme to toughen them up physically and mentally for competition in the future. The man behind this new style approach to the hitherto rather languid, highly unsuccessful middle-class world of tennis is Alan Wells, better known as the 100 metres gold medalist in the Moscow Olympics in 1980.
Tremendous row in the background. Lara will not settle. The Cuban, he's last to go down, and this is a deliberate ploy, but Wells ignoring everything. The Olympic final underway. Wells got away well, and also going well is Lara, and on the far side Lennon, and accident. But it's Wells on the near side for Great Britain. On the far side, Lennon of Cuba. They can't see each other. Lennon and Wells absolutely together.
Go! Can you not beat him, Nick? As soon as you get back. Well, I'm aiming to make them understand what it's all about, and to understand that it's tied up with fitness, it's tied up with sleep, vitamins, everything. You know, it's the whole picture, and I'm trying to tighten the whole picture up, if you like.
Yes, because British tennis has lacked the really sort of